Sup everyone, it's Silver Orpheus, and this is a really hard video for me to make. Like, to put matters into perspective, it took me 30 minutes after setting up my recording equipment to actually get this recording started. However, that does not mean to say that I didn't want to record this, because I really do, because it's really important going forward. However, I would like to go ahead and say this much. Probably a good decent size of my audience probably figured this out. Another chunk of it probably did not. However, this is more of a personal video. So if you're looking for the next Let's Play video, that's gonna be a little ways away. However, let's actually get into the main topic for today's video, and that would be a mental disability. I do suffer one. This more or less began when I was watching a live stream from the Real M14. It was one of his Legends Arceus streams, and there was a specific topic in that stream, mostly regarding the disability of autism. It is not something to laugh at. Autism is a very serious condition. However, that's not exactly me. I did mention during that stream that a lot of my family is on the spectrum. Well, surprise, surprise, I'm no different. I too am on that spectrum, except I suffer something a little bit smaller. I suffer Asperger's syndrome. For those who have no idea what this actually is, Asperger's is a very high-functioning form of autism. Getting into a bit of specifics, and this is more or less me going to my own experience with Asperger's. More or less, people like us are very invested in very little things. For example, in my case, it would be things like video games. I'm pretty invested in telling stories, and more or less just those kind of things. Like, we have very limited interests. That is more or less that is pretty much a condition that autistic people usually share. I am no different from that. Again, my big two things are storytelling and the big one, video games. That's pretty much where I draw my line there. However, a big distinction between Asperger's and full-blown autism. Asperger's people are pretty smart really intelligent. Asperger's people generally, again, this kind of goes back to like the whole high-functioning part of it. High-functioning autism basically means that we can more or less control it, and because our limited interests, part of the autism spectrum gets in the way of a lot of things, it more or less means that a lot of us focus a lot on a particular topic. For me, this would mostly be things like me being able to mathematically figure out Locke's abysmal steal rate in Final Fantasy VI, figuring out what weapons are better than the others without using the game's menu, and generally things like that. Pretty much mostly mathematical topics of the sort. So ultimately, how did I come to find out about this? Well, after the live stream, I got very invested. I have known all my life that I was different from most individuals, pretty much of my age, and even above that, really. Above and like below, like even like a lot of little kids I know differed from how I was at that age. So it really got me thinking on like what could possibly like be like different in me in comparison to everyone else. I eventually landed on a disability. It was not indeed Asperger's, nor was it even full-blown autism. But looking at all the disabilities and stuff like that, I eventually landed on something called, I actually landed on ADHD. And ADHD happens to be pretty genetic. In fact, the ratio of having ADHD in an offspring is 50%, even if only one of the parents has it. Autism, no such thing exists. You can have autism or even Asperger's if like none of your parents have it. And that was more or less a hard thing for me, because I eventually did think that ADHD was that, because one of my parents does indeed have ADHD, but that's not the case. I am part of the 50% that does not have it, but instead has Asperger syndrome. It's kind of strange, because since finding this out, I've been looking at a lot of like websites and even talking to my mom, who happened to be a psychiatrist and even a therapist. In fact, that's actually who I found out that I had Asperger's in the first place with, because she eventually found out that I was doing all this research on disabilities and stuff like that. And if you're interested in knowing how long I went without knowing that I had Asperger's, but everyone around me did, at least 12 years. The first sign of Asperger's that I displayed was something that could be written off as just being a genius. That genius moment was being able to recite every US president in order at the age of 5 years old. That is something that most adults that I know cannot even do. So that's already strange enough to begin. The second part of it comes in the fact that I never once understood like some things that like normal people would find really easy. Things like tying your shoes and things like that. And that's actually still something I have no idea how to do to this day. Most people say that tying your shoes is like the easiest thing in the world. I think it's a pain in the ass. And I'm probably not alone on that topic, because strangely enough, a lot of my friends are actually Asperger's as well. But they don't seem to display the same traits I do. And that's the thing. Asperger's is different within every person. And I kind of don't want to disclose like any of their names, but I'm not the only Asperger's person in Players Press Start. At least 2 other people are. And that's kind of a unique experience that I think like our collab channel has like over a lot of them, is that the vast majority of us in the group have Asperger's syndrome. So back on topic, however, a lot of things about Asperger's can kind of coincide with another disability, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is, if you want to shorten it, OCD. This is the disability I knew I had. I knew I had OCD. I have a specific order for every belonging I have. If at least one of those items is misplaced, I get extremely frustrated. Like, immediately. It doesn't take long for me to notice it's gone either. So it bothers the hell out of me. And it gets even worse knowing that I have Asperger's and things like that. But in the end, I'm actually kind of glad that I have. I'm kind of glad that I at least know about it. I can't say I'm really happy to have it, but it's kind of a thing that certain people have advantages and disadvantages with. Like, we're kind of unique on that spectrum. However, that kind of brings me to my experiences with it. I already mentioned being able to recite every US president at the age of 5 in the exact order that they were inaugurated. But that's not all. At age 6, I had a fascination with staring at ceiling fans. This is a common trait within most people on the autistic spectrum. They usually have strange fascinations with, well, strange objects that no other person would just have an obsession with. Like, a normal person, like somebody who doesn't have autism would probably just look at a ceiling fan and just like, it's going around in circles, what's the point? I look at a ceiling fan, and I just go to thinking, like, how is this all working? Like, what's the mechanism that's causing it to move? Like, all of that. And that was something that I've been displaying since I was at least 6 years old. At age 9, I had a strange fascination with snakes, the second most feared creature on the face of the earth. And by that point, more or less everybody in my family kind of pretty much knew that I had it. At least, yeah, pretty much anybody in my family who was really, really close to me for most of my life knew I had it. Whether they understood it was a different situation. And it kind of clicks because it was also at that stage in my life that I kind of began having a little bit of some family problems, particularly with my father. But however, now I know it's not really his fault because he doesn't understand how all this works, much less how I could not understand how his ADHD worked. Same concept. It's kind of like a learning process that both of us have to go through. Like, what really annoys the hell out of each other, and kind of like finding common ground on that thing. However, I'm saying however a lot. That's kind of something that needs to change. It's kind of hard for me to go on. However, there we go again. Probably my biggest obsession, if this could not be guessed, was video games. This was triggered the very moment I held a controller for the first time. The very second I held it. It was pretty much all over from there, and video games have more or less become the main thing in my life from then on. And what's more, by the point that I held the controller in my hand for the first time, both my parents already knew that I had Asperger's syndrome. And my mom in particular also knew that it would have been a mistake to give me that, because it would then become an obsession, and it would become more or less a thing in the rest of my life. My dad, not understanding this, made the mistake. And more or less, it is because of a mistake that I am where I am today. So, more or less, what advantages do I really have over, like, most, like, people on the autistic spectrum? Well, the first thing is that I don't really need someone to watch over me all the time. I'm more or less an autistic that doesn't need therapy, and, like, basically what I'm trying to say is that I'm somebody on the autistic spectrum, but I don't need help from anybody. I can just function as I am, who I am, and the symptoms that I display are super light. Like, normally, if I were to make, like, a noise like chalk on a chalkboard, yeah, it would bother me, but I wouldn't, like, full out, like, erupt into, like, a fit of rage unless it happens so many times to the point where I just cannot handle it. Like, another thing that annoys the hell out of me are most high-pitched noises. And whenever one of those pops up in, like, a real-world setting, I might, like, tell you to, like, please, like, tone it down or just outright stop, because if it happens again, or even if it happens, like, over and over again, that's when I erupt. And the thing is that there's no way to really tame it. Anybody will really tell you there's no cure for autism. There's just not. Asperger's is no different. Asperger's is just something we just live with. And it's just... It's really... It's hard. And the thing is, a lot of people, like, I've actually, like, read up on this. A lot of people, like, say that people with Asperger's are, like, particularly gifted in, like, what they do. Honestly, we're just as intelligent as, like, normal people. We just don't... We're intelligent, we're as intelligent as a normal person, but there's just some things that we just cannot do. Like in my case, I can't tie my shoes at all. That is more or less a form of my autism, and that is something that's probably never going to change for as long as I live. It's just really hard. And it really annoys the hell out of me whenever I hear, like, theories and, like, myths that things like vaccines increase the rates of autism. No, it doesn't. After hearing, like, things like that, it really, really angers me even more, knowing that there are people who actually think that and just don't try and, like, vaccinate their kids at all. When in reality, vaccines have nothing to do with autism, and it's just a naturally occurring thing that's just becoming more and more common with age. In fact, it's kind of something that's going on with Asperger's in particular, because apparently online sources will classify it as like a rare illness, yet most of my friends also have Asperger's. It's... I don't know. It's... Generally, all of the common things said were things that I already mentioned in this video already. Anything that... If there was anything different, I would have left it out. But, more or less, that's pretty much it. Absolutely nothing is going to change going forward. The only thing that really should change is that for any of my audience, be aware that I do indeed have a mental disability, and that impairs my ability to, like, comprehend, like, certain things, or even pretty much just, like, understanding things, and, like, don't try and, like, force them, like, more or less, imagine being, because, again, I have more or less impaired social skills. Like, I don't understand, like, a lot of things that, like, most normal people would. Like, I'm not over on, like, Reddit 24 hours a day looking at, like, all sorts of, like, dank memes and stuff. And that's the thing. Most people within my high school group, they do that. And I don't. So it's just kind of the way of the disability, I guess. But more or less, just treat me normally. Treat me like you normally would, except be wary that I do indeed have a mental illness. And that's pretty much all there really is to it. That is more or less my condition. And I don't exactly know what this is really gonna bring, but there's only one way. There's only one way, and that's to hope. I'll see you guys either for the next live stream or for the next Let's Play that should be coming out this month. See you guys then.